of over 50 points. We've got two teams in the NFC East, not really great defense, but you know what? They got pretty good quarterback play. And Devontae Smith, I think, is going to be the one to benefit. Obviously, the rookie wide receiver had a really nice week 1, not so much week 2, but he does lead the Eagles in targets so far. He's got 15. And just for reference, the next highest targeted person, on the Eagles is going to be Jalen Reagor at 11. So Smith, definitely the number 1 wide receiver there. He's playing on over 80% of the snaps. Look, he looked impressive against the weak secondary in week 1. And guess what? He gets another weak secondary here in the Dallas Cowboys. Already allowed 32 receptions to the opposing wide receiver position. They're dealing with some injuries as well. Keanu Neal is out, which I think is going to be important for another player I picked. But I like targeting this Cowboys defense, and the guy I like targeting with is Devonta Smith. I'm not sure his IPO is going to be too crazy. People probably a little bit off him after the week 2 sort of down week. This is a good bounce back spot for Devonta Smith. I think you're going to be able to pick him up for a good price in the Jock Market IPOs. Let's move on to our second pick now. And the second guy I want to target on Jock Market for this week from this Monday Night Football game is going to be Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, look, there's been some injury concerns early in the week with Cooper, but he was back practicing in full. It's going to be all systems go here for this game. Main reason I like Cooper, it's these home road splits. Amari Cooper is just a beast at home. And just for some reference here, he's averaged 14.6 yards per catch at home last season versus just 9.75 on the road. Averaged over 80 receiving yards when he's playing at Jerry World. He loves that fast track. And remember some of those games with Ben DiNucci. I think this Eagles secondary has been playing a little bit above its pay grade. I think they're due for some regression. Amari Cooper can certainly take advantage of it, just kind of like Deebo Samuel did last week for the 49ers. So I really like targeting Cooper on those Jock Market IPOs. Again,
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show presented by Jock Market. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm out here on the West Coast. It is pitch dark. I don't know what's going on. I hate this time of year. It's sadness because you lose daylight. That's less time to go out and try to sneak out and hit golf balls quick. But you guys don't care about that. You care about baseball. That's why you're here. We've got 5 games to break down that are going on today. We've got 3 on the early slate. We've got 2 on the main slate, if you want to call it main slate. But either way, we're going to be looking at the entire dearth that the MLB has to offer here. But of course, I'm not going to be the one going through most of it here for you. It's going to be one Terry McBride, my guy at DigitalB21 on the Twitter sphere. Terry, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty good, buddy. It's been a short morning. I found out that I was on this show about a half an hour ago. I checked the schedule, and so that was a bit of a surprise. But scrambled to get everything together. Fortunately, it's a short slate. If it was a 15-gamer, I might have been in a little bit of trouble, but we're good. So psyched to be here and talk through this mess with you. It might be a better day to go hit golf balls. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, stop it. This is great. I mean, if we're going to wake up and talk anything, we might as well wake up and talk baseball. And we're getting going, I just want to get your thoughts on this wild card race in the AL. Obviously, you're one of those sickos that cheers for the Yankees. And so we just got to throw it out there right away. Interesting little series that went down in Boston. Good stuff for you. But looking forward to this next week we got going. It's a big week coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just it's ultra tight. And anything can happen kind of a scenario. As good as the Yanks played this last stretch of games, they're perfectly capable, as we've seen a few times, for going in the tank for 7 straight. And they've got some tough matchups coming up. So it's going to be interesting. But I mean, Yanks a game up, Boston next in line, and then Toronto a game back of them, Seattle 2 back of that. You could see the Mariners go on a run and sneak past everybody. There's all sorts of scenarios. Oakland's only 3 games out of it, so they're not out of the mix for the wild card either entirely anyway. It's going to be really, really interesting.
As a Twins fan, I'm fully on Team Mariners. Let's go Mariners in every single way, shape, and form. I don't know. It's an underdog story. I'll take the underdog story here for sure. I mean, Chris Flexen is on the mound today. That's just where we're at for this baseball team. I don't know how I feel about that as a Mariners new fan, I suppose, but it's going to be an interesting way to go to. But as we're getting going here, hit that like button for everybody, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That goes such a long way for everybody here at Awesemo, everybody behind the scenes, and ourselves, of course. We're self-serving in that way. Jock Market, the presenting sponsor, we'll be talking about them a little bit it's a great day to be jumping over and playing on another site. If you have some of these smaller slates with smaller prize pools, this is kind of your chance to be able to take a look at some of these other places where you can use some of these deposit bonuses, and we'll talk about that. But are you ready to get going, Terry, my dude?
Yeah, just loading up the early slate ownership there. So yeah, we can jump into that. I forgot it was on two different tabs with our split slates here today. But yeah, I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's an interesting thing because you're gonna refresh it, and it's what 8:40 p.m. Eastern time, so it's like 20 minutes after football locks. We'll be looking at that, and I'm pretty sure there's still going to be some money to be made here, especially in this early slate. I think this early slate is pretty fascinating, and we're going to just get to it. We've got the Chicago White Sox -151 at Detroit, 9.5 total runs in this one. Dallas Keuchel, noted ground ball pitcher. I don't really know what else to say about the guy because it's not the older iteration of Dallas Keuchel, or it is the older iteration. It's not like his former self, should I say. Dallas Keuchel here. On the DK sphere, I know you're a blue site guy, but 7.3K over there, you're not going to have a bunch of lovely pitching options. I mean, Cal Quantrill is going to be as good as it gets here on the slate. So we're going to be considering some interesting spots. But Dallas Keuchel, what is your interest level going up against this Detroit team?
Yeah, I think given the options on this slate, if we're picking a pitcher just on talent, on track record, it's got to be Dallas Keuchel. As strange as it might be to say, he's the ace of this slate. That's how bad this little 3-gamer in the afternoon is in terms of the pitching that's available. So I think it makes sense to go to him. And it looks like the field certainly is on the DK slate, approaching 50% ownership for 7,300. Similar story on FanDuel at 7,600. He's approaching 40% ownership. And we're talking about a lefty pitcher with a 13.3% strikeout rate on the season, a 4.72 xFIP, an 8.1% walk rate. Doesn't induce many swinging strikes, doesn't throw enough called strikes, puts too many guys on base, allows too much hard contact, 9.1% hard contact, 39.6% barrel rate. He's walking 8.1% of hitters this season, so he's super targetable for everything. This is a day where you're just going to hold your nose and play different pitchers and hope that you land on the right bats and that you have a few points at pitching and you're not negative at pitching, really. But yeah, I think Keuchel's definitely the most talented guy, and he warrants that ownership, especially going up against a really lousy Tigers team. We know that this Tigers team has strikeouts in the lineup. We know that they're not good in terms of power or anything like that. I don't have my team stats board up, but I'll open it up as I'm talking through here. It's just a positive matchup for Keuchel. He's a ground ball pitcher, like you said, so likely to keep that lineup down anyway and hopefully suppress some of the lingering power that is in there. So yeah, I think that's a go-to spot. I'm not comfy with it with all that ownership on it. I'm going to want to spread out if I'm playing that slate, but I don't really know where else I'm going.
Yeah, so for the season, I got the splits up here for you. Detroit, 24.8% strikeout rate up against left-handed pitching. We're not looking for Keuchel to be racking up strikeouts. We're looking for anybody to be serviceable on the slate whatsoever. A 152 ISO, 99 WRC plus against lefties from Detroit. I think that's all semi-encouraging stuff here as well, where you could see him survive in this spot. I'm looking for like 10, 12 out of my pitchers today. I am not asking for much in this spot. I mean, somebody asked a second ago, can we play a relief pitcher? I mean, you're borderline looking at something like that. My big issue is that most of these cats, other than San Martin, it looks like who is going to be making his big league debut, and we'll have to get him updated into the tool here from the Cincinnati side. That game didn't even have a line out earlier because they didn't know who was going to be pitching on the Cincinnati side, but we're looking at some guys that are actually stretched out here. So I'll ask you this on the front end, because this is the MLB Strategy Show. What are you kind of looking at in terms of the pitchers? Like, what do you think your expectation needs to be for these guys to get through? And is there any viability at looking at a relief pitcher on a 3-game slate like this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it kind of is a viable thought, at least. I'm just trying to decide which one of these bullpens and who that would be, because it's not like, I mean, I would be inclined mostly to look to the White Sox bullpen in that thought, because they're so far ahead in the division. They can sit Dallas Keuchel down early if they want to. I don't expect that here. He's not the kind of guy that you would be worried is going to go out there and blow out his elbow throwing 100 miles an hour. That's just not him. So I think he'd be okay to just get through a game. I don't expect them to yank him early, but maybe that's the spot, because then you're still attacking that Tigers lineup. You've got a few high-end, high-leverage relief types in that bullpen. Outside of that, we're dealing with the Reds bullpen, which is okay. The Pirates, the Tigers, the Royals and the Indians bullpens. So the Indians bullpen has some interesting arms in it. Maybe you could go that direction, but nobody really leaps to mind as like oh, this guy's going to come in and he's most likely going to give us 2 or 3 innings out of the pen, rack up a few strikeouts, potentially get a win. There's nobody that immediately jumps to mind for me anyway. Is there anybody that stands out for you as like a potential option that we would want to consider?
See, I mean, for me, the thing with the White Sox, they would be the probably last spot I would be going to, because I don't think they would be wanting to push anybody. Sure, there might be a guy that's a bad pitcher already that they might give 2 innings to, and that would become viable. But Keuchel's still pitched into the mid-90s. I don't think they look at him as a premium arm. They need a bubble wrap going into the postseason. But there's got to be somebody here in this Cincinnati spot or Pittsburgh. I think looking at that game, and we'll get there, but you know, a guy like Cowher, still as bad as he's been, he pitched 96 pitches his last time out. So basically, if you're going to try the relief route in any way, shape, or form, you're basically saying Cal Quantrill is going to put up 0, Matt Manning is going to put up 0, Dallas Keuchel is going to put up 0. And I find it very difficult to believe that we're not going to find at least 5 to 10 out of at least a couple of these guys, especially now down here on the bottom. I'm going into the San Martin guy, and I'll get a little bit more info on him as I'm looking into him as we're going. But let's talk the other side of it. Nothing like going from a 13.3% K percentage in one pitcher on the side in Keuchel to a 13.5% K percentage in Matt Manning. It's not been a good ride for one of the better prospects in baseball. Not really come to fruition. 41.3% hard hit percentage isn't like apocalyptic, but a 461 expected slugging, 286 expected batting average, that's pretty apocalyptic. Talk to me about Matt Manning in this spot.
Yeah, look, the good news is, like you said, is big time prospect. It's his first year as a rookie. He's only 23 years old. He's got time to get better, and he'll probably get over this. I mean, he's a talented kid. We expect it to develop. He's probably up early. We see these bad teams bring kids up early a lot. Probably needed a little bit more development, but they needed help at the major league level this season. Like you said, 13.5% strikeout rate. He walks 7.5, 5.16 xFIP, only has a 24.4 CSW percentage. So that's combined called and swinging strikes. So it's just not nearly enough strikes. The hard contact you mentioned puts him at a negative 1.9 in my BBB minus K metric, which just means there's going to be too many opportunities to create runs, too many opportunities for sequential hitting. There's power available there. So yeah, it's just a dynamite spot for these loaded White Sox. Looking up and down the confirmed White Sox lineup, you get a weird version of it with Luis Garcia batting second. Luis Robert and the Luis Garcia, no Timmy today, it looks like. But still, it's a loaded lineup in basically any configuration with this team. So maybe we're leaving out a little Luis Garcia. We don't really worry about Cesar Hernandez or Zach Collins at the bottom. But at least, you know, the stars on the team and then Andrew Vaughn stuck in the middle there. There's 6 or 7 hitters in that lineup that you can easily go to in this spot against Matt Manning. They're pulling a decent amount of ownership because they're going up against Matt Manning. But I think that's a spot where I'm definitely going to be looking to get some offense. You can get very contrarian and weird by going to Matt Manning on the mound, but I don't think it's going to pay off. I think this is a definite look at a very low score, negative number possibility, and not a good spot.
Yeah. So there's 6 pitchers here on this slate, and Matt Manning, 16.3% top 2 pitcher percentage on a full slate. That sounds like a fine number. That's dead last by over 20% compared to Quantrill, Cowher, San Martin, Keuchel. So good times. Best of luck if you want to play some Matt Manning. I think for me as well, if I'm going to play him, it's just basically getting leverage going up against this White Sox team that should be popular, and I think appropriately so. Looking at the top stacks tool, as you were kind of referring to, I mean, they're the top stack on this early slate. So is there a way that you can kind of find to get different, especially for you over on the blue site where, I mean, there's some decent, I mean, even this 5K contest, I mean, this is more realistic kind of stuff to go out and win. So I hope you're all pretty interested in playing over there today too.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be about those guys toward the later part of the lineup. For me, it's Andrew Vaughn, 3,300 on DK at 14.5% ownership, 2,200 on FanDuel is a little silly. First base and outfield eligible, only creeping a little bit above 10% ownership mark. 237, 311, 401 on the season is not blowing anybody's doors off, but 15 home runs, a little bit of power there. He's another highly regarded prospect. I'll say he's not perform maybe to the levels that he will one day, but it's not a bad rookie season. 164 ISO, creating runs 4% worse than average. He's dealt with some injuries and things like that throughout the year as well. So when he's in the lineup, I like getting to him. I think he's a little bit sneaky. 46.3% hard contact percentage, 10.9% barrel rate on the season as well. That rivals a lot of the really good hitters on this White Sox team. So I would throw him into the mix, and at least it helps you get a little bit different. Everybody else is owned in that 25-30 range. We're going to need to look to get different elsewhere if we're rostering White Sox.
And the Detroit side. I mean, earlier in the season, Robbie Grossman, his underlying metrics were a little out of control. They've regressed. They've finally gotten back to a place you would expect Robbie Grossman, but he's still batting third here in this spot. Akil Baddoo, decent enough leadoff hitter. Jonathan Scope has some pop, and less so here this season. And Miguel Cabrera hitting the ball hard, but that's about all I can really say for him. What are you kind of doing with this Detroit side?
It's interesting. I mean, there's not a lot of ownership there. Just looking up and down that lineup, we've got two guys over on the FanDuel slate that are over 10% owned, one guy on the DK slate, and that's Eric Haas, the catcher, at 10% owned. So there's definitely opportunity here. It's not a good lineup. We've talked about it all year. We've attacked this team with pitching through most of the year, but there is a little bit of mid-range pop, at least in the first 5 hitters there. You can stick Haas in that from the 7 spot in the lineup. And you've got guys who 4 out of the first 5 hitters are above average in their WRC plus. It's actually only Miggy Cabrera who's below average at a 96, 4% worse than average. But Baddoo, Jonathan Scope, Robbie Grossman, and Heimer Candelario all above average in terms of WRC plus. They all have over 15 home runs. So there's a little bit of room there to maybe find some interesting plays. You get a little bit of speed out of Baddoo and Grossman in that mix. So that's where I'd be looking. And there's not going to be a lot of people on them. They're very affordable. I don't need to really look at Nico Goodrum, Willie Castro, Isaac Paredes on this slate, but they're going to be in the lineup. Their correlation plays. Those are the kind of plays that, come through on a slate like this, where a guy doubles and drives into, and that's going to be a relevant score on a 3-game slate. So I think if you're building 150 lineups, it's important to consider those also ran type hitters in some of them, in a subset of your lineups as you're building them. So don't totally leave those guys on the table and only focus on the prime hitters in this lineup. But those are the guys I want to build with, or the guys up at the top if I'm going to Tigers here. And I think it makes some sense. You're attacking a massive ownership share in the Dallas Keuchel. On Dallas Keuchel there, you're attacking a pitcher who doesn't strike anybody out, who's given up a ton of contact and everything that we talked about negatively for Keuchel. So I think it makes some sense. I don't think they're getting necessarily enough attention in this spot, actually.
Yeah, Eric Haas, I mean, he's the only one pulling any ownership on DraftKings here today, 10%. Everybody else underneath that 10% number, which on a 3-game slate, that means you should probably be going there a little bit. Akil Baddoo, probably my favorite. Left on left, don't really care. Not a guy that I would be looking at for a bunch of power anyway. So there's that. Anything else from this game for you, Terry?
Just to throw it out there too. I mean, the counter to that would be, Keuchel, ground ball pitcher, 55-ish% ground ball rate on the season, I think. But he's also staring down the barrel of his worst home run per 9 since his rookie year in 2012 in Houston. He had a 1.48 that year. He's got a 1.38 this year. So he's given up a little bit more power this season, a few more long balls. And this is the kind of slate where you're looking to find 1 3-run home run that nobody else has that might make all the difference. So I think it's a good spot for the Tigers.
His 365 xWOBA is worse than Manning. His 296 expected batting average is worse than Manning. And a 479 expected slugging, worse than Manning. So if you want to be looking at it in that regard, obviously, of course, the White Sox, much better offense. So it's understandable. But got to say, Detroit probably equally as bad of a pitcher here in Keuchel, simply the only difference being the launch angle in that regard and not much else. So Dallas Keuchel, the exit velocity on a lot of these hard hit balls has been a little bit down, but otherwise just not a very good pitcher at this stage in his career. Not that he was ever like a huge racking up strikeouts guy, but he was always pretty effective, good real life pitcher. So yeah, we're looking forward to this one. And people thought we would not be able to fill an hour of this show. I have a feeling after one game in 20 minutes, we're crushing the game. Well done by us. A little filibuster action, but let's move it on. Actually, you know what? First, we got to talk Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there. $29.95. Let's throw this out there right now. Full access to all the premium content we have at Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, premium Slack, lineup builder, so much stuff that we have available constantly in every single sport. And right now, using promo code MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word, Awesemo Plus is going to be 25% off for your first week. That's a fantastic deal. If you've been looking at getting behind the paywall, seeing what we have to offer there, use MLB Deeper Dive, all caps, one word. And then if you want to check out just the Awesemo Plus MLB packages, $4.95 for the weekly package there. Stop guessing, start winning. There it is. Lovely. We've got producer Chris here behind the scenes helping everybody else here. So, yeah, MLB Strategy Show. Throw that in together. Good times. What is it? MLB Deeper Dive. That must have been different. It's early here. Everybody's putting everything together. But yeah, MLB Strategy Show. That's a better code to use. So MLB Strategy Show, all caps, one word. Check that out. All right. We're going to move it on. Pittsburgh plus 195 at Cincinnati, 9.5 total runs in this one. I was trying to stall a little bit earlier because I was trying to pick up all the pitcher metrics I possibly could, because Pittsburgh has a confirmed starter now in what is his name? Connor Overton. So that's good times. What are you seeing out of Connor Overton in this spot on the old fangraphs.com?
1 sec. Let me get over to that game. I was updating my run line that I had guessed incorrectly there with that spread.
I was going to say it got bet up already. So I'm looking at some lines. If you're into such things, check out Odd Shopper. We'll talk about them here in a second as well. But that line's moved. So, I mean, it opened quickly at 8.5 and it got bet really, really fast to 9.5. So that's probably a bad sign. But Connor Overton, in his limited sample size I'm looking at here in the big leagues, 2.51 ERA, has never really pitched deep, but 64 pitches his last time out. He also pitched 4 days ago, so that's not super encouraging. I'm not sure what that pitch count's going to look like, but 0.91 whip now in his limited sample size. That's got to at least be encouraging that he can survive in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the guy's been able to put up at least a reasonable little stint in 14 and a third innings, 24.1% strikeout rate there. The 0.91 whip, I will point out, comes in spite of a 9.3% walk rate. So we might just be looking at a little bit of happenstance on some BABIP there. And I'm pulling that up to see where we're sitting. Yeah, currently sitting at a 200 BABIP across two teams. Apparently he's been with two teams in the majors so far in his short career. So yeah, dealing with a little bit of happenstance in the low whip there. I'm a little concerned about the walk rate, of course, but if he's the guy who can come out with a 24% strikeout rate in this spot, going up against that Cincinnati team, there's certainly some strikeouts there. It's not the easiest lineup in the world, but it's also not the strongest version of this Reds lineup that we've seen throughout the season. So I think there's some opportunity there if he's giving us any kind of depth. I'd be concerned about the depth. I'd be concerned about the walks, but there could potentially be some strikeouts here on a slate where we're not going to be really finding them very much anywhere. So I think at least, just from that perspective, from the fact that he costs 6,100, 5,500 across the two sites, there's at least some opportunity, some upside to get to this guy in some of your lineups. It's not a comfy play, and you're throwing him up against, let's see, the Reds coming into today. He is right-handed. All right. Just want to make sure I was reading the right splits. So the Reds, this is the better side of the Reds splits. You're dealing with a 4.27% home run rate, a 104 team ISO, a 104 team WRC plus, a 190 ISO, 23% strikeout rate. So they're above average in most of the offensive categories. They're below average in the strikeout rate. I don't love it, but there's not a pitcher that we do love on this entire slate. So it makes sense to grab some shares of him.
So we go from a guy who's right-handed to a guy who is left-handed. His name is Reaver Sanmartin. That's a great name, not going to lie. Probably my least favorite thing whenever I look on Fangraphs or finding a new player, somebody that I don't know anything about whatsoever, is seeing their age. He's 25. I hate people born in 1996. I mean, this is just like ridiculous. I just don't, my brain can't process how young these kids are. And I mean, he's on the older edge. I mean, there's multiple players that we've talked about forever that are much younger than that, but it still just frustrates me to no end. I continue on. Reaver Sanmartin, only 160 pounds. That's also frustrating. 6'2". What a slim reaper he is. Stop it, kid. Go eat a burger.
He was 6'2", 160 pounds. That's insane.
I know. I'm just like going through it. I was just watching a YouTube clip of him. Probably not great for my internet, but I don't really give a shit. I mean, this is just hilarious looking at this guy. I'm excited to actually watch this game now. I want to see him, but 11.5K per 9 in AA. It kind of went down a little bit towards AAA, 9.73 here in 10. How many games did he play? 14 total games that he started, 21 games there at the AAA level, was acquired in the trade that they got Sonny Gray from the Mariners. Good times for them in that regard. Only a 0.66 home run per 9. So it looks like he's limiting power decently enough at the AAA level. This is his debut. You never know how it's going to translate, but I think that risk is mitigated by the fact that he's 6,300, and the known quantities we do have on this slate aren't very good to begin with. So Reaver Sanmartin, interest level.
Yeah, I mean, based on that, it's another one where, assuming we're getting an actual start from the kid, which I see no reason to not assume that here, you're throwing him up against the Pirates team that is completely inept against left-handed pitching in everything except avoiding strikeouts. Their strikeout rate is actually very good, 21.8% as a collective, but they've got a 79 WRC plus, so they're 21% worse than average creating runs, a 136 ISO, and a 2.42% home run rate, which is the worst in baseball against left-handed pitching and the second worst against either hand. So there's no power there. There's no run creation there. They put the ball in play a little bit. He might not rack up a ton of strikeouts in this spot in his major league debut, but I think there's every reason in the world to think that he has at least a few clean innings against this Pittsburgh team. And like we've said a few times, that might be enough. Now it looks like he's pulling over 50% ownership for that price on the DK slate. So it might make sense. I don't have an ownership mark on Connor Overton, but it might make sense to just consider that as a direct pivot almost. You're going to a much worse matchup, obviously, going to Overton there. But if you're saving a ton of ownership for the same price, I would maybe at least consider spending some of those Sanmartin shares over on Overton, or at least spreading them around the slate, maybe go to one of the other games and the other pitchers. But yeah, I think Sanmartin, I'm going with Sanmartin actually, because there's no accents on his name on Fangraphs. So Sanmartin here definitely
I like that.
deserves a little bit of attention.
Reaver. I've never heard that first name in my entire life. Reaver. Have you?
I don't think so. Not that I remember. I'm going to Google it and just see what we.
Never heard of it. It's
what
not
is
a
a
real
Reaver?
thing.
Iowa Western Community College. I'm guessing it's their mascot because they're the one answering the questions here. IWCC.edu says the simple answer, a reaver is a river pirate. Based on the etymology of the word reaver, it was a fitting term to label the Missouri River plunderers. The reaver became associated with Iowa Western Community College when the college was just beginning to develop as an institution of higher education. There you go.
All right, wake up, everybody. Wake up. We're back. Okay, cool. We're here. We're talking baseball. We're going to move to the batting line, to the lineups here in this spot. So on the early slate, Cincinnati, 18.6% top stack percentage. We got Pittsburgh, 12.2%. So, I mean, that's second to worst. And you just have to be considering bats from all angles on this slate. That's kind of the way that I look at it. Which team do you feel like you have a little bit more interest in, and why is it Cincinnati?
Well, it's because of those numbers that I just read off before against right-handed pitching. I mean, they've excelled through the season against right-handed pitching. Like I said, we've got not necessarily the best overall version of the Reds anymore, but there's still some very capable hitters here. There's more quality to go to in this lineup up and down, starting with Jonathan India up top, Nick Castellanos, Joey Votto, Eugenio Suarez, and all his power in the middle of that lineup. I know that Suarez is hitting 188, 275, 403, but he's got a 215 ISO. He's got 28 home runs in 549 plate appearances. That's what he's paid to do. They'd like him to make contact and get on base a little bit more frequently than he is. 30.6% strikeout rate is rough. He's oddly only making 38.3% hard contact this season, even with a 14% barrel rate, which is weird. But I still think he's, perfectly capable. Kyle Farmer is even interesting. 16 home runs on the season, a 156 ISO. He's not a big power option, but he's a guy who's capable of surprising, and he's a guy who doesn't typically get all that much attention at the shortstop position, second base and shortstop eligible on the FanDuel slate. Delano DeShields, if you believe he can get on base a couple times, has certainly some speed to steal a couple bases, has done it 2 times in his 43 plate appearances so far with a 415 on base. If he continues that trend, he might swipe you a bag today. Tucker Barnhart, capable catcher. So up and down, the Reds lineup is just better. It's just easier to get to. But I think there's, especially with the pitcher who's on the mound, at least some compelling options in the Pittsburgh side of things. Like I believe Brian Hayes is going to be a very good player in this league. I believe Brian Reynolds already is a very good player. Yoshi Satsugo has a ton of power in the right opportunities, 8 home runs and 235 plate appearances with a 180 ISO at this point. But he pops in my home run model in this spot today. You don't get a ton of options down the lineup. Anthony Alford, Wilmer Defoe, Cole Tucker, Taylor Davis, Kevin Newman up at the top is somewhat interesting for cheap in the infield. If you just want to stick him in there, there's not going to be anybody owning him, but he's not having that good hit tool season this year. 533 plate appearances at a 221, 260, 307, 0.086 ISO, creating runs 48% worse than average. Ouch. That's not the good version of Kevin Newman that we saw a couple years ago. So he's probably going to be hitting second. So if you wanted to stick him in there, you could. It's not a great lineup, but you're throwing him up against the left-handed rookie making his debut. that we, is not necessarily a known commodity, and more than half the slate's going to be on him. So I think it just makes sense to attack some of that leverage at worst.
Yeah. And so we'll see if Joey Votto ends up being in this lineup again. Do we have the confirmed? Yeah, we do have the confirmed. He's in there. So he's in there, number 4. Max Schrock there, now moved up to 2. Definitely a lineup upgrade for him there. But all these guys pulling quite a bit of ownership on DK, for sure. Castellanos, 35% there. Jonathan India, 33.5%. I'm going to throw it out there too. MLB player rankings are completely free today. We also, NFL Showdown, there's a couple larger contests for that, I suppose. So maybe you want to look at that too. We've got the player rankings for that. So check it out for the Showdown stuff. Good times had by all here. But yeah, there's not going to be any surprise there. They're playing in Cincinnati. The wind's blowing out towards left, 5.3 implied runs. I think all these factors kind of show why this run line, I mean, it opened at 9 is now what I'm looking at. And then it just went up to 9.5 immediately. And so, yeah, I'd be looking at kind of a nice little overplay on that if you're into such things, which I'm assuming you might be. Anything else for you from this game here specifically? We talked Pittsburgh bats at a number of length here. Cincinnati, they're great plays, but they're going to be popular. Anything else to touch on?
You just mentioned Schrock, and I think it's at least worth mentioning 2,700 on the DK slate, and he was one of the lower owned guys. I expect that'll go up as we approach lock because he's hitting second here at that price. But I think that's a very good price for a decent hitter, at least over 108 plate appearances. He's been pretty good so far. So that one's kind of compelling if you're just looking for a price to make things work with other players, with other lineups. This is not a slate where we're really going to, I want to focus on stacks. I want to stack hitters, but I'm more open to grabbing 3 hitters from this team and a couple odds and ends in certain lineup constructions on such a short slate. Can't speak this early in the morning. So I think he can be functional that way. When you find those cheap guys who are going a little bit under owned, I think they can be very useful for those kinds of constructions. Brian Hayes, similar story on the other side of this game, maybe Yoshi Tsutsugo as well.
Yeah, we're a little bit more than 2.5 hours away from lock. I'm expecting that ownership to climb drastically, and I want to throw it out there. I'd probably be, if he gets up in that 30% range alongside Castellanos and India, probably trying to hit the eject button. Mainly a 27.2% hard hit percentage, a 363 expected slugging on the season. Doesn't have a ton of sprint tool either, 26.8. And that's my, what is that? Feet per second or whatever the metric that they have for that. Basically, it's a little light blue on Baseball Savant. I want to throw that into the mix. So somebody that at that like crazy level of ownership, I'm starting to expect might come for him, for a guy who's been, batting 8th routinely for this team in the past, now moved up to second. Even that 300 batting average with 3 homers here, 823 OPS, that looks nifty, but it looks like the underlying stuff might not completely be there. Are you seeing the same thing?
So since he's hitting second, what I'm interested in is the 18.5% strikeout rate, the fact that he can get on base. He's at a 343 on base clip, creating runs 11% better than average. So I kind of look at him as a little bit of a correlation play with the other guys. So maybe he's more functional as part of a stack. So unwinding what I was saying a little bit about the one-off, but I do think on a slate like this, where we are just kind of looking for potential scoring, you can almost treat it like a cash lineup where you're just looking for that plug and play of, all right, even if it is just coming through correlation, I can grab a few points here for cheap, but it's not going to work to your point, if that ownership number triples. That's only interesting to me if that ownership was around that 11% mark where it was. And like you said, I expect it's going to go way up. If it triples, absolutely, the eject button is the option there.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we don't need savings, I don't think, on this slate. That's also the other part of it too, is that like we won't need the sub 3K number for him, but we'll be able to have utilization of it depending on what we're doing here in this Kansas City and Cleveland game. There's at least some bats in the existence of Sal Perez and the existence of Jose Ramirez and Mondesi and all these other guys that are 5,800 and above that might actually make it somewhat useful to be able to get to them. But we'll get there here in a second. But first, we got to talk about our sponsor, Jock Market. And if you haven't had an opportunity to check them out, they've turned fantasy sports into the stock exchange. Forget about buying and you're trying to figure out what's going on at the end of the night. You get to buy and sell shares of players in real time. Super clean interface, very easy to go sign up and play right now. Use that promo code Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit, up to a $50 bonus. That's money that can get put to use immediately here. You basically get to bid on players. There's a pregame IPO. You pick up your shares then, or you can join in a little bit later. You can buy, sell, or hold. You can also short now, which is just an absolute blast. Based on your analysis, if somebody ends up getting pinch hit for, sell those shares immediately at a high point. You can also, so if you're paying attention to anything, based on your analysis, you are able to have an edge on Jock Market. One of the easiest ways to get involved on a day like today, where, maybe the DFS contests aren't as interesting. This is such an easy way to be able to track while you're at work, while you're doing anything out and about. You're able to just buy and sell those shares. If you're listening to a game in your car, I do that a lot when I'm driving back and forth, listening to Twins games. It makes me sad now, but it's an enjoyable thing for me to do. And going to Jock Market allows me to be able to react to anything that's going on in real time and make real money. One of my favorite things for today is definitely going to be targeting some of these guys that we're talking about that are on the back end of some of these lineups. You have, Eugenio Suarez and Votto and spots like that. I mean, they're going to go underrepresented compared to Castellanos in India. You're going to have Sal Perez go for a ton of money. Well, maybe go pick up Eric Haas there for Detroit. Just basically in the same way that you're pivoting on DK or on FanDuel or wherever you're playing at, pivot on Jock Market. Be able to get some of those cheaper players, get cheap shares of them, especially if you hear something happen where you're able to react to a home run in the moment and be able to buy high on a player. I found that to be very profitable. So check it out. Anything else to add from your end, Terry?
Oh man, I mean, what can you tack onto a great read like that? That was dynamite. It's the enthusiasm's coming through, man. That was top notch. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's McDonald's coffee. That is what that is. So thank you so much to Jock Market. We appreciate you guys so much. Really enjoy working with them. Check out their NFL product as well. Just such a good job that they do with those shares. And PGA starts back up here, full field event on Thursday. I'll be talking about that a little bit later with Jason Roslin today. But we have another game for this early slate to cover. That is Kansas City plus 150 at Cleveland, 9.5 total runs in this one. Jackson Tower is a pitcher that is gaining a lot of popularity. He's probably my second favorite pitcher. Yeah, in the top two pitcher percentage, 50%. Man, what a time to be alive. Jackson Tower Chalk Day. How do you feel about that?
I think everybody just saw how I feel about that as I was laughing through that intro, but this is the ugliest pitching slate of the year. I mean, it's easily the ugliest pitching slate of the year. Tower, 22 innings in the majors this season over 6 starts, 16.7% strikeout rate, so 3 percentage points better than the guys from the White Sox game, which is good. 15.8% walk rate, which is very, very bad. 6.58 xFIP, a 2.23 whip. That's atrocious. That's one of the higher whips I ever remember seeing. 9.3% swinging strike rate, 24.6 CSW percentage, not throwing nearly enough strikes. 52% hard hit rate, 10.7% barrel rate. So he's putting way too many guys on base, and he's a walking version of a home run. Negative 9.8 in my BBB minus K, meaning there's going to be way too many guys on base, too much run creation opportunity. Not a good pitcher. I would be much, much more interested in grabbing some Indians bats and attacking that 45% ownership share. And you're just, we have to pick a couple of these pitchers and just kind of ride with them. That's not the one that I want to pick. I'd much rather be on the Indians on that one.
I don't know. Here's the thing. Jackson Tower is not very good. Okay. 16.7% K percentage looks like nothing, but the only guy better than that is Cal Quantrill here. 504 expected slugging plus a decent enough prospect. 11.46 ERA. It's just ungodly to look at. It's not even real life. Like, nothing about this slate is real life. And the more we talk about it, the more I'm going to dig through some relief pitchers as we get to the main slate, so I can touch back on it as we're covering everything there. But yeah, Jackson Tower, at least there's a pulse there. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to talk myself into some weird things this morning. I do have a great question here from Nero that came up earlier, and I think that this is the appropriate time to talk about it. He said, no problem with playing bats of opposing teams against your pitcher on a 3-game slate. I'm going to say I encourage it. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think on a 3-game slate, it's perfectly viable, and especially this 3-game slate, I think it's definitely makes sense. So yeah, absolutely. There's no problem with that whatsoever here.
Yeah, it's something that on a full slate, you're never going to do. No. Excuse me. On a full slate, you're never going to do it. But on one of these 3-gamers, especially with garbage pitching, you can get 10, 12 points. You get the home runs captured in a certain spot. Like, there's just so many things with individual events, plus, half the game for most of these pitchers. I don't know what the innings are going to look like for a guy like San Martin. We're going with San Martin there. Dallas Keuchel, is somebody that has been out in the 5th inning, 6th inning here routinely. That's a third of the game or half of the game where those pitchers aren't even going to be out there. And, you're looking for survival mode here. And now let's talk about the number one pitcher here on the slate. And welcome to extreme, and I mean extreme, Cal Quantrill chalk day. What a time to be alive. I'm just going to throw that out there. This guy has been very, very good of late, but not to be box score watching or anything. Still under a 20% K percentage, but he limits hard contact, which is a good thing to do against this Kansas City team that has that guy. Sal Perez. He's really good at hitting baseballs hard. Talk to me about Cal Quantrill in this spot.
Yeah, look, he's going to be popular. 8,600 on TK, up over 50% ownership, 10,000 on FanDuel, not scaring anybody away. 143 and 2/3 innings, 19.6% strikeout rate. The xFIP is 4.42, which is much more respectable than some of these other marks we've seen on the slate here. Doesn't throw enough strikes, 25.1% CSW, but he's still one of the more effective guys on this slate. He's got a positive mark in the BBB minus K metric, which is one of the rare, positive marks on this slate available. So as far as being able to limit run creation, it's not a good number, but it's one of the only positive numbers on this slate for run creation opportunities for just putting guys on base. So I think he's on talent, after Keuchel, who's a proven guy. I think just on raw talent in terms of the prospects, in terms of the young guys, it's probably Manning than him, but he's put it together a little bit more at the major league level than Manning has so far. So I think Quantrill's probably the number two guy here in terms of, major league capable at this point. That said, it's not been a great story. It's not been a great track record. There's plenty of opportunity on the other side. There's a lot of good hit tool guys on the other side. There's a lot of speed. You mentioned the extreme power with Sal. You also get a decent amount of power with Carlos Santana, without Alberto Mondesi in that lineup. So there are certainly hitters to throw back at him. This is definitely a pitcher where I would consider either undercutting the field or, maybe you're making some weird roster choices where you're rostering Quantrill and you're rostering some of these Royals bats, because it's going to be that kind of slate. And that was a sharp question before that person asked about doing that, because I think it makes a lot of sense to just kind of go into these games looking at these pitchers and assuming that each one of these guys is going to give up 4 or 5 runs and not really sweat the negatives that come with earned runs and just focus on who might give me 5 innings, who might give me 5 strikeouts here. And Quantrill's definitely on that list. And a lot of these other guys not necessarily on that list. So I think his ownership makes sense. I want to be below the field just in a DFS instincts kind of a sense, but I just don't know where I'm going if I'm not going there.
I think we're going to be going to the Pittsburgh side. So I'm trying to figure out exactly who it's going to be here in this spot, but Overton, 64 pitches. That was 4 days ago. I can't imagine he's going to get close to 60 pitches here again. That gets him maybe to 3-4 innings here in this spot. I got to think against a chalky Cincinnati team too. If you're not going to be playing Cincinnati, going to someone, and that's the other hard part about doing bullpens is you got to be guessing right. And sometimes it aligns perfectly. You see the PLR next to their name on DraftKings. It makes sense. They show up in our projections. We don't have anybody else showing up in our projections as somebody who could be a long reliever in this spot. So it's going to be difficult. I'm going to dig into Pittsburgh here as we're going here. I said I was going to. It's a gross thing to be doing, but welcome to 7:45 here on the West Coast. Let's get to bats here in this spot. You covered it nicely.
Shelby Miller's in that bullpen?
Say that again.
Oh, no, he's sorry. A name I haven't seen since I'm going to say like 2015. Shelby Miller is in that bullpen, but he's in the minors, it looks like.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. I mean, I'm looking at like Miguel Yajuri. I'm looking at like all of the things in the world right now, but he's 7,900. And am I going to pay that for a possible long reliever? I mean, that's so hard to be pulling the trigger on some of these guys, finding some of these rotational dudes. You could end up sneaking a win out of one of these guys as well, which would be the real crazy next level GPP galaxy brain play. But let's try to go back to Normalville here for 1 second, because I'm overwhelmed. But if there was a slate, this might be the one to be firing the trigger on that. Let's talk Kansas City bats. You covered it pretty nicely there. Sal Perez, under 27%, which is shocking to me. Part of that is just Cal Quantrill is pulling so much ownership. I have no problem playing Sal Perez against him. In fact, I'd probably encourage it here in this spot. Whit Merrifield, under 20% as well. Every bat, the rest of the way down, under 20%. Get into Ryan O'Hearn, 2,500. If you need savings, you don't need savings, but you could. Talk to me about KC.
Sorry, you got me stuck in the Pittsburgh bullpen.
Oh, dude,
I was just looking at Anthony.
It is truly the black hole of existence right now. We are researching bullpens on the fly.
So ugly. I was just looking at Anthony Banda as a potential option. He's a guy who, might go 2 innings for you if you get him. He hasn't pitched since 2 days ago, so that might be your 2 inning guy out of that Pittsburgh pen, Anthony Banda. But
okay, I like that.
Yeah, not a great option though. So yeah, jumping back over to the Royals and talking about sensible things. Yeah, I think everything that you said there. Look, if you're going to a guy like Adalberto Mondesi, you're paying up 5,800, but he's 10.9% ownership. He's missed most of the season. Guy's made 112 plate appearances. He's hit 6 home runs and stolen 13 bases in those opportunities. 2.52 ISO, creating runs at 12% better than average. This team would have been better had he been available to them throughout the entire season. He's an excellent player. Carlos Santana has a dramatically underperformed expectations this year. 133 ISO, only 19 home runs and 631 plate appearances. This is a guy who was reliably in the 25 to 30 home run mark over the last few seasons. So I expect there's more power there on any given slate kind of a sense, particularly up against Cal Quantrill. You could certainly get a home run out of the switch hitter Carlos Santana. Andrew Benintendi, since I traded him in our dynasty league, has been kind of rolling along. Nice little 16 home run season this year, 2% above average. He's going to be hitting cleanup, 2% above average in run creation, rather. Going to be hitting cleanup for not a big price. A lot of ownership there, but not a big price tag. Nicky Lopez can even swipe you a couple bases, gets on base 366, creates runs 7% above average. So there's bats to go to up and down this lineup. It's not a bad lineup of individuals. They just haven't really come together as a good baseball team this year, oddly. But there are good individual players on this team, so I never really mind going to them. And in this spot, I think it makes all the sense in the world with all that ownership on Cal Quantrill.
So you're also seeing a total now here at 10. I mean, that Kansas City side has gone up a little bit here too. You can see it straight there on our MLB, our lineup building tool there. I do like this spot to get to more KC bats. I think that might be, for me, what I'm doing against the most popular pitcher here on this slate. A guy that even on FanDuel is just going to be garnering a ton of attention at 10K. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'll just take my shots on the number of times that I can get to these other pitchers. I mean, if you go to click on FanDuel right now for the early slate specifically over there, 31.3% top pitcher percentage and ownership of 28.2%. I would be shocked, like actually pretty shocked, if he wasn't much higher owned than even Dallas Keuchel is pulling 38%. Would you agree with that if you built some lineups over there on FD, or is that something that you're kind of not thinking?
No, I agree with that. I think he's going to be probably push up over that mark, and I'm happy to get to Dallas Keuchel shares if people are going the other way. I mean, Keuchel's a pitcher, like I've said a few times, that at least has that track record with me where, like, I know there's been quality to get to the kind of game that we're talking about needing on this slate, which is not a 9-inning complete game shutout with 10 strikeouts. It's a 5-inning, maybe 5 and change, get me a win, get me 4 or 5 strikeouts, and I don't care if you've given up 3 to 5 runs. I think that's a Dallas Keuchel start. That's what I've just described is a Dallas Keuchel start this year. So I just think there's reliability there. So if more of the field is going to be going to Quantrill, which I think makes sense, I'm happy to go the other way. I'm happy to just find other opportunities and then throw bats at Quantrill. I think it makes sense.
And on the other side of this one, where more people are going to go to Cleveland against Jackson Cowher. I'm singing because, again, this is a 3-game grossness thing, and I'm entertaining myself. Talk to me here about the Cleveland bats, which should be popular.
You're entertaining us too, buddy. That was good. I like it.
You're so welcome. I'm a ridiculous human.
Cleveland is they're interesting for the matchup. I mean, there's definitely power through that lineup, particularly through Jose Ramirez, Franmil Reyes, and Bobby Bradley, the obvious power hitters. But I think you get, a decent guy like Harold Ramirez is a little bit underrated for his contact profile, 45.9% hard hit on the season with just a 15.6% strikeout rate. So he's putting the ball in play, striking it pretty well most of the time. He's below average in terms of his ISO. His WRC plus is 8% below average, but he only costs 2,300 on DK, 2,400 on FanDuel. A little bit interesting if he's hitting in that 6th spot with those other guys. Bradley Zimmer later in the lineup gives you a little bit of interesting, post-hype prospect kind of profile, 7 home runs, 13 stolen bases. The tools are still there for Zimmer. It's just never really come together for him, but he's another guy that is in any given slate kind of a play, might steal you a base, hit you a home run. So there's a few guys like that, but yeah, we want to be concentrating on obviously, 2 through 6 here, 2 through 5 here, Ahmed Rosario, Jose Ramirez, Franmil Reyes, Bobby Bradley, 2 through 5. Rosario is a player I wouldn't sleep on. Shortstop eligible and shortstop and outfield eligible on FanDuel. Only 3,000 over there, 4,000 on DK, just shortstop. He's pulling a decent amount of popularity, but he's a good player that I think people forget about in the middle of this lineup. He's had a couple decent seasons of mid-range power and mid-range steals, 10 home runs and 12 stolen bases on this season, 563 plate appearances, kind of underperformed for the year in Cleveland, but I think there's talent there. So it's not overly appealing given the ownership marks, but for price, if you just want to stick a good player at shortstop on a slate where there's not a ton of options, I think he makes some sense to just kind of ride with there.
Anything else from this game whatsoever?
Miles Straw's up to a 350 on base percentage with all that speed, 28 stolen bases. Not a player I ever like to get to for DFS purposes, but
4.5K on DK. And again, not that salary matters, but it just matters me rostering a good baseball player.
1.4% barrel rate for Miles Straw here, 25.4%.
All right, we're going to keep it moving along here. We got a main slate. We're going to touch on it, of course. The main reason I'm spending more time on this early slate, a lot of you are going to be playing that. Go ahead and zoom to this ending because we've got NFL lock that's going to happen 20 minutes before this slate starts. And I'm going to quote something for you, and you have to just let me know whether or not you understand what I'm getting at. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of, I forgot this last one, foolishness. That's the other one.
Are you asking if I know what that's from?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. Yeah. It's the tale of two cities. This is the tale of two games in this main slate. We've got Washington plus 149 at Colorado, 10.5 total runs in this one. Fantastic. Yay. Great game environment. Other game, Oakland at Seattle here in this spot. You've got what? Oakland plus 103, 8.5 total runs. And it's looking like it's trending down a little bit here. So bad game environment, but looking at this Colorado side, German Marquez, a fantastic pitcher here, pulling up this DK quote unquote main slate. 8,200 for him makes some sense. He's coming in with less ownership than Cole Irvin, Chris Flexen, again, because he's the pitcher who's in Coors Field as opposed to the two who aren't. But talk to me about German Marquez in this spot.
Yeah, so this is a spot I'm happy to get to if I'm playing a 2-game slate. I think it makes all the sense in the world. Talented pitcher. He is, definitely more talented than the opposing pitcher in this game and more talented than the other two guys. So he's the best pitcher out of the four. He's pitching in Coors Field, obviously, which is a problem for most people. For him, he's been better for his career over a lot of different statistics at Coors Field. So it's a guy who I rely on. I'm happy to get there when he's starting against a bad baseball team, even in Coors. I don't really sweat it with him. 23.5% strikeout rate over the course of the season, a 3.64 xFIP, 12.3% swinging strike rate, 5.4% barrels, 38.1% hard hit, keeps the ball down at a 5.6 degree average launch angle. There's just not much of a threat outside of Juan Soto and Josh Bell on the other side of this one. So I'm happy to just get overloaded on German Marquez shares. If you came into this slate and told me you were like, 60 some odd percent German Marquez, I wouldn't think it's totally crazy, despite the fact that it's at Coors. I think it makes sense to get over the field going up against a bad team with the best pitcher on the slate, ballpark notwithstanding. He's the best pitcher in Coors Field over the course of his career. I mean, he's a guy who knows how to pitch there. It's not something I ever like to look at or talk about, except for at Coors Field, where I think it's important. So.
Yeah, he's the best pitcher on the slate, but he's also in the worst game environment. But on the other side of it, Josiah Gray is a very good pitcher himself. 214 expected batting average, the 445 expected slugging. I expect to go down considering he has only a 35.9% hard hit percentage on the season, 25% K rate. That's going to be higher than German Marquez on the other side, but not the noted track record. Obviously somebody who's kind of coming into his own year. Colorado, they're carrying the highest total on the slate, though, by far at 6.5. What are you doing with Josiah Gray?
I think it probably makes sense to grab a few shares of them. I'm a little bit concerned about the game environment with Coors, his 10.7% walk rate over 59 and a third innings this season, his 12.6% barrel rate. You mentioned the hard hit is very good, but that's a very inflated barrel rate, and that's way too many guys to be putting on base. He gets away with it a little bit because he's got a 24.9% strikeout rate, so he can sometimes pitch his way out of trouble. 14.7% induced swinging strike rate is excellent for a rookie, excellent for anybody, and sparkling for a rookie. But a 1.42 whip, a 5.04 xFIP, there are things to be concerned about with him going into Coors Field, even against a bad Rockies team. Obviously, they're going to be better for you at Coors, as everybody is. There are some capable hitters in that Rockies lineup. That's another team that better as individuals, I think, than as a batting order. They don't hit sequentially well. They don't do a lot of things well together, but there are a lot of individual hitters that I still like getting to here. So, and Gray's another guy that barrel rate and the way that my home run model comes together does have pretty big indicators on the other side for the Rockies. So I'm a little bit concerned about the Gray spot, but I think it makes sense at price, especially at popularity on FanDuel. He's only 5% on a 2-game slate. So if you're just looking for an offbeat kind of pitcher play, I think it makes sense to look to Gray there on the FanDuel slate. It's not going to pay off most of the time, but 5% ownership on a 2-game slate, that just makes sense to me.
Yeah, we're seeing some ownership on these hitters. Yeah, I know that's shocking to everybody involved, but we're seeing 63% for Trevor Story, 52.3% for Brendan Rodgers, CJ Cron 51.4%. Basically, you're fading for game theory purposes because this is the best hitting spot. If you're playing cash, you're an insane person, but enjoy that. Let me know how that goes. But you're playing 5 Rockies, you're playing a bunch of Nationals, and you're just combining the 2 teams together. And then you're probably playing pitchers elsewhere. But talk to me a little bit about hitters on both sides.
So yeah, the ownership is going to be ridiculous. It's a 2-game slate, and of course, one of the 2 games is at Coors Field. It would awesome. Break down that way.
Yeah,
ridiculous. So yeah, it's going to be really, really difficult to avoid very heavily rostered hitters in this. This is one where you're going to need to get weird with some of these combinations. I think one interesting way to look at it is if you just take your shortstop from the other game, you're immediately making a different decision than most of the field, because 63% on Trevor Story. And then on the other side of this one, I'll see this Escobar pulling in 22 some odd percent. So maybe just grab a shortstop from the other game and then start poking around with what you can put together with some of these hitters. And those are the kinds of plays that I like to look for. Now, JP Crawford is pulling mid-teens ownership on the other side. And then the
mail machine, that's the guy, right?
I think so.
Oh,
unless
God.
You want to go to our pincushion that we've been beating up all season long, Elvis Andrus. And maybe this is the slate where we actually look at Elvis Andrus and decide to play him. And we ignore the 294 on base.
We do not, Terry. We do not. We stand in solidarity against such things.
I agree. But I think that does make sense to just look positionally and say, all right, what if I do this position from the other game? Where does that gain for me? Mm-hmm. Second base is similar from that perspective. You get Abraham Toro from the Mariners under 10% on the DK slate. You get Jed Leary. I don't have an ownership projection on him, but I assume he's going to be lower than that. Maybe not Josh Harrison with his heavier ownership, but just look positionally back and forth between these 2 games and look where you can get different with your roster combinations and what that'll buy you in the other game. But yeah, looking up and down these teams, I mean, from the Nationals, it's Juan Soto, it's Josh Bell, and then put together, maybe you grab Lane Thomas and put him with them. On the Rockies side, more good individuals, Brendan Rodgers, Charlie Blackmon, Trevor Story, CJ Cron, Ryan McMahon. If you wanted to stick Raimel Tapia on there, he's never a player I like getting to. 330 on base, 20 stolen bases on the season, but creating runs 23% worse than average. So it's the core of the lineup for the Rockies. That's where everybody's going to be. It makes it difficult, but there's bats to get to here.
All right, let's move ourselves to the last game here. We got 2 minutes. You're going to all want to check out the NFL Strategy Show going on next, the Week 3 recap with Josh and Adam. We've got a bunch of other great content coming up. I'll close that out here in a second. But of course, now you're looking at the terrible offensive game here on the other side. We've got Oakland and Seattle. The pitchers definitely going to be interested in Cole Irvin, Chris Flexen. Talk to me about pitchers in this spot.
Yeah, so both guys super highly owned. You get a 16.1% strikeout guy in Cole Irvin. You get a 17% strikeout guy in Chris Flexen. Both guys have 5 and change walk rates, which are pretty good. Mid-4s xFIPs, similar whips. These are 2 pitchers who are pitching very, very similarly across the board this season. Neither one pitching all that well. Both going to be super popular, 70%-ish ownership on both pitchers on the DK slate. Over 30% on the FanDuel slate. This is why the Josiah Gray at 5% was kind of compelling, despite the Coors Field factor, despite the rookie, all of that stuff. So I think it's going to be mandatory to just kind of have to roster these guys just because there's only 2 games to choose from. But I don't really like the idea of going with either of them. If I had to choose, it would probably be Cole Irvin going up against the Mariners. Just I think the Oakland lineup is a little bit better.
All righty. Well, we're also looking at some bats. It's going to be a little bit underappreciated here. I mean, we're looking at Washington, 28% stop stack percentage, Colorado, 40.4% percentage. If you had to pick one stack between these 2 to close it out, Oakland or Seattle, which one do you prefer?
So just from a DFS perspective, if we're talking DK, I think Seattle, just because they have less ownership on them and there's more things you can do, and there's no hitter priced over 5,000. If we're talking in terms of where am I getting the two best players, that's definitely going to be from the Oakland lineup. We're talking about Matt Olson and Starling Marte. Matt Chapman, you can throw into that as well. But there are hitters I like on that Mariners team. JP Crawford, we mentioned at short, Mitch Haniger, Kyle Seager, Ty France, Abraham Toro, even Jared Kelnick, not drawing a lot of ownership, only 6% across sites and not all that expensive. So I think it's a good spot to go to there if you're just looking to offset some ownership.
All right, Terry, you're the man. Way to close that thing out strong for us. Again, everybody jump over to that NFL Strategy Show for the Week 3 recap with Josh and Adam. I'll be on a golf show later. We've got the Showdown Deeper Dive. Check that out at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have you in Savoca. Then I'll be on NFL Showdown Live Before Lock with Matt Kachevsky. Looking forward to that. He's Terry McBride. He's the man. I'm Eric Lindquist. We got through that puppy. We'll see you later.